Afternoon and welcome to this week's episode of Doing Justice Brings Joy. I'm your temporary host, William Adams, on this July 10th, 2026. Uh, again, not going to be a fun day today as we're going to be discussing the recent disappearance and death of Nolan Xavier Wells and the odd circumstances surrounding his death. Uh, we're also going to talk about many other deaths that are happening in our community, amongst our people that are going unheard, unnoticed, and unaddressed. So, to go ahead and start, uh, Nolan Wells was a college freshman in Mississippi who went missing a few weeks ago, and his body was found on July 6th. He was last seen on a sailing fishing trips on a boat with four of his white classmates and fellow teammates on the football team, and they are the last ones to have seen him alive. And the fact that they all came back and he ends up missing is concerning. Uh, and they all are essentially not saying anything about what happened to him. We don't know what happened. All we know for sure is that he was the last one there, and or they were the last ones to see him alive. They were with him last, and he turns up missing from the boat and is found dead. And this is one of many deaths that are happening in our community. You can see this episode as a follow up to a previous report I did on the numerous young black people found hanging from trees all across the South and across the country. That number has only grown since then. We can add at least 4 to 5 more black people who have been hung or who have been found hung from trees, all ruled suicides, and investigating it further. Uh, and so there's a growing pattern of mysterious black deaths. There was up north a Marine officer, a black Marine, who was found dead in the woods outside base, like just outside the base grounds. And investigation, no one can figure out how this person mysteriously died, found dead. And so there are all these mysterious deaths happening. And we have to be aware of them. We have to understand what's going on. So, going to briefly cover Nolan, and then I'm going to cover several others. So, Nolan Wells went missing on July 4th, 2026. Was found and confirmed dead on the 6th. Was last seen on Horn Island, Mississippi, with friends. Circumstances of his disappearance unclear. After a new development in the Knowles case emerged involving the body found in the area that Wells was last seen, Wells' mother, Kristen Wilson confirmed on Facebook that her son has passed away. On July 4th, Nolan Wells was reported missing after going on a weekend trip with friends on Long Island, Mississippi. The Ocean Springs native was last seen shirtless, wearing blue swim trunks and black sunglasses on a boat with friends. The friends who were on the trip with him and their families have released formal statements in response to the allegations of their involvement. However, they have collectively said that they are not sure where he went after being the ones to notify the police of him being missing. So they notified the police that he'd gone missing and that they had no idea where he was. Again, main issue is he was on a boat in the middle of the ocean. And so it's suspicious that no one on the boat saw where he went. And so this source, of course, has sparked an outcry from the local Mississippi community. We have seen an escalation in racial tension in this country. We've seen an escalation in racial violence in this country. Again, this happened 4th of July weekend, the same weekend where the Patriot Front held a mass march on D.C., on the Capitol. All masked, all covering their faces, and parading through the city, carrying Confederate flags and shouting white supremacist slogans. And so there is an escalating level of violence. Again, previously I pointed out, the past 4 years have been some of the worst in anti-Black racial violence we've ever seen in this country. It's actually the worst since the FBI started measuring racial violence in 1992, or hate crimes in 1992. The second worst year of hate crimes, I want to say, is 2023, with 3,400 reported by the FBI. 36 is the record, and that was in 1996. And all of that is to say that that was during the Biden administration. Since Trump has become president, we have seen the escalation of the rhetoric. We've seen the escalation of tensions and the violence. And unfortunately, we won't have the true numbers of how many hate crimes targeted Black people in 2025 until September. And when those numbers come out, I'll have to come with another report about just numerous Black people being harmed, numerous Black people being hurt, and nothing being done about it. There's a growing demand for a hate crime bill specifically targeting African Americans, specifically to protect African Americans, because we have always been the largest victims of racial violence in this country. It's not disputable. We have always been the largest victims of racial violence in this country. The lowest point we ever saw was in, I want to say, 2018 under President Barack Obama. But since, well, not 2018, sorry, 2014 under Obama. But since Trump has gotten in office to now, racial violence against African Americans has doubled since the Obama's low point. It has gone from 1,700 to 34. It's actually doubled. And that's with the FBI statistics admitting that they themselves underreport hate crimes because hate crimes, A, are massively underreported, undercharged, to the point where while the FBI typically reports a total amount of 10 to 15,000 hate crimes per year, their calculations say that there's a 250,000. So they only record 15, but their estimates are a 250,000 hate crimes happen every year, and that number is growing. And we have to be aware of these things. We have to keep our eye on these things because these stories are often overlooked and swept under the rug. These stories don't always get national attention. Very often they don't. A clear example of that is in 2019, the state of Alabama had 98 police departments, 98 police precincts, all report hate crime data to the FBI. And you know how many hate crimes were reported in those 98 precincts combined? Zero. In 98 different police precincts in the state of Alabama, zero hate crimes were reported. That's not possible. That is an organized effort to keep things under wraps and to sweep things under the rug. And so I'm going to briefly touch on other cases that have happened. So bear with me a moment. This is the case of, excuse me 1 second. Oh, 1 second. So, black woman found hanging from a tree in Miami Park. And the suicide ruling is raising all too familiar questions. Let's see if I can do something here about. There we go. I lost it. 1 moment. There we go. There's all too familiar questions. Tania Nicole Miller was found hanging from a tree in Miami's Gwen Cherry Park. While authorities say the case is an apparent suicide, and her sister insists that the explanation does not match the woman she knew. According to NBC6 South Florida, Miller was from Flint, Michigan, and was found dead on June 18th. Her family told the outlet that she had been in Miami since February. And several community posts said she was found hanging from a tree in the park. The detail is exactly why this case has hit such nerve. A black woman reportedly found hanging from a tree in the South during the Juneteenth holiday period immediately sparked fear, outrage, and comparisons to America's long history of racial terror. Still, the Miami-Dade Sheriff's Office has maintained that detectives found no evidence of foul play. And I want to briefly scroll down to here. That Those difficult questions are why this story has become bigger than one investigation. The imagery of a black person found hanging from a tree carries weight that cannot be separated from history. The NAACP notes that lynching was used to terrorize and control black people in the 19th and 20th centuries. The Equal Justice Initiative has documented more than 4,400 racial terror lynchings in the United States between Reconstruction and World War II. That history is also why modern hanging deaths involving black victims often bring immediate demands for transparency, especially when authorities move quickly towards a suicide finding. In February 2026, 21-year-old Kyle Basinga was found hanging from a tree at Fair Oaks Park in Cobb County, Georgia. Detectives said there were no signs of foul play and were treating the case as a suicide. The community pushed for answers. In September 2025, DeMartavian Trey Reed, a 21-year-old student in Delta State University, Mississippi, was found hanging from a tree on campus. Reed's family hired a civil rights attorney, Ben Crump, and called for an independent investigation. The Marshall Project later reported that officials ruled Reed's death a suicide, while his mother and other family members disputed the findings. In Alabama, 39-year-old Dennis Richardson was found hanging in an abandoned home in 2024, according to the Associated Press. A state autopsy ruled his death a suicide, but his family's private autopsy found no definitive evidence that he died by suicide. In 2021, a 16-year-old Michaela Miller was found dead in Hopkins, Massachusetts. Reported that the medical examiner ruled her death by suicide by hanging, but her family disputed the findings. The National Black Justice Coalition also said advocates continued calling for justice and accountability. In 2020, the deaths of Robert Fuller and Malcolm Hirsch shook California. The Los Angeles County medical examiner ruled Fuller's death a suicide after he was found hanging from a tree in Palmdale. Days earlier, Hirsch had been found hanging from a tree in Victoriaville. ABC said that officials said surveillance footage showed no foul play at the time federal authorities reviewed both cases. The pattern does not prove foul play in Miller's case, but it does explain why her death has triggered so much. As you can see, many deaths are happening in our community. We are losing a lot of people. And previously, I tempered my response by also sharing that we do have an epidemic of self-harm and suicide in our community, especially in our rural black communities, that is being addressed. But this is there are too many bullet points here to be coincidence. There are too many bullet points here for there not to be a pattern. And we've seen in the recent incidents with Chud the Builder that there is active effort to antagonize our community. There was another incident where also on 4th of July weekend, or not, on June 7th, in Lee County, Georgia, gunmen opened fire at a black family's family reunion. He only wounded one person, but he opened fire on a family reunion with more than 15 people there. This happened in Georgia on June 7th this year. And there have been many other incidents where people have opened fire on black families, on black people. And what has been fairly consistent is these people are not being charged with hate crimes. As strange as it is to say, even with black people leading hate crimes in this country, hate crimes are still actively not reported and actively not charged by police. There are numerous incidents of racial violence being done against black people where the suspect is charged with the lowest possible, given the lowest possible charge consistently across the country. The charges are downplayed. Whereas if a black person, again, the Carmelo Anthony situation, where if a black person defends themselves, they face the maximum charge possible, even charges that don't make sense given the circumstances. But if a person who is not black harms or kills a black person, they are undercharged and often go free if they are charged at all. Our community is under attack. Our people are under attack. And it's to the point now where I'm really questioning our institutions. I'm really questioning the CBC, our HBCUs, our church, our clergy, our legal counsel, our law students, our legal professionals. I'm questioning all of our leadership and all of the institutions we've built to protect us of how is this happening? And there's not a national outcry. How is this happening and not being addressed? In Georgia, just the other week, I want to say it was last week, but it might have been 2 weeks ago, they passed a resolution against anti-Hindu violence specifically targeting Hindus. And I do not oppose by any means that measure. But the scale of violence against African Americans is incomparable to any other ethnicity. It's incomparable. Over 50% of all racial violence done in this country is done against African Americans. 20% of all hate crimes, including religious and LGBT and gender identity and sexual orientation, over 22% of all hate crimes are solely against African Americans, who make up the largest share of all hate crimes. And yet, we cannot get any measure passed to protect us. We cannot get any measure passed to protect our families, to prosecute those who harmed us, to ensure that DAs are held accountable for not charging people against us. This is outrageous. And it needs to stop. And things need to be done. And so that's why, again, it's not a fun day today, but it's a conversation that needs to be had, and it's something we need to talk about. And on that note, I'm going to end here and conclude this week's episode of Doing Justice for Each Journey.